The sound of the old train whistle is now heard in Iowa only on an occasional basis. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, trains in Iowa County and throughout the state of Iowa crisscrossed the countryside like spokes in a wheel. The railroad was a lifeline of a growing nation.
Oh, hello, sir. Can I help you? Welcome to the Rock Island Lines and to the Rock Island Depot. You want to buy a ticket or need some information, or how can I help you?
In the early days of Iowa, just prior to the Civil War, only a few hundred miles of track were in use. There were lines from Dubuque to Jessup, from Clinton to Cedar Rapids, and an important line from Davenport to Marengo. In 1854, George Wilson purchased 1,000 acres of land from the government, which now includes Victor, Iowa. By 1861, Wilson had moved to Iowa and entered into negotiations with officials. The building of the depot for the Rock Island Railroad line began on November 15, 1861. This was the first building in what is now the town of Victor. The Rock Island line made its way through Iowa County and began running in the mid-19th century a few years later. Early in the 20th century, Iowa ranked first in the nation in terms of railway mileage per square mile of land area. This was in 1927, during the heyday of railroading. In Victor, the freight, passenger, telegraph, and express offices were in the same building. The telegraph office and passenger waiting room were kept open all night. 15 to 20 trains passed through daily. These were the days when the road map did not yet exist. In fact, until 1900, the only maps available were railroad maps in the depot. Roads were unmarked, and there was no highway system in Iowa. Many older citizens recall the large railroad map prominently featured on the wall of any depot. Towns grew with increased railroad traffic. Those lucky enough to have a rail line go through prospered, while the unfortunate struggled. Trains were the major haulers of fuel, such as coal, and large freight. Rural Iowa depended on trains to haul livestock and grain. There were often cattle yards adjacent to those depots. However, the days of prosperity would soon disappear for the railroads. In the 1950s, the interstate highway system came into being. Semi-trucks became the transportation mode of choice for shippers. That spelled drastic changes for the Rock Island and other railroads. With the completion of Interstate 80, the railroads were forced to adjust to loss of business dollars by scheduling fewer trains. Smaller depots were closed in an effort to stabilize the company. Victor and Marengo were among the casualties, as well as a host of other Iowa rural communities. The Rock Island declared bankruptcy in 1975, signaling an end of an era in Iowa County and the Midwest. The depot stood idle until 1973, when it was turned into a nightclub by two Victor men. The depot was moved and ended up 2 miles south of town near Interstate 80. The business and building were later abandoned, but purchased by area resident Dale Noyes and donated to the Iowa County Historical Society. The depot was dismantled and reassembled piece by piece on the grounds of the Pioneer Heritage Museum. Dale describes some of the challenges involved in restoration.
Well, the Victor Depot was moved out of Victor out on the interstate and was going to be demolished, and I went out there and Dave Seaton and I bought it for $1, and we was going to move it as a unit, but we found out they had put in new electric lines and they didn't want to, it would cost a lot of money to get under them lines, so we dismantled it and brought it down here and reassembled it here. Well, we tore it down, scraped all the boards and stuff. I belong to a Good Sam's Society, and they helped pull the nails and scrape the boards, and we just put it back more or less like it was, as near as we could figure out. Bill Randolph's crew tore it down and brought it down here, and young Ballard helped put it up out north of town.
Entering the restored depot, visitors can see what a typical train traveler would have experienced. Many items have been donated by Iowa County residents whose families worked for or had connections with the railroad. In the passengers' waiting room, one can sit by an old-fashioned stove which provided much of the heat throughout the station. Passengers passed the time reading timetables and magazines. Children probably enjoyed candy from a small vending machine, such as this one from the Marengo depot. In the summer, the only cooling was a ceiling fan. This particular fan is from the Victor depot. On the wall is a collage of depots which served Iowa County in the past. Almost all of those depots have vanished from the scene, including the Marengo depot, which discontinued passenger service in the late 1960s. Bob Tolbert of Victor was a signal maintainer for the Rock Island Line from 1945 to 1980. He retired from his job in 1980, 5 years after the Rock Island filed bankruptcy and faced its demise. He has seen 5 decades of the railroad. Bob drove a track motor car on the rails to repair and maintain the all-important signals which kept trains running safely and on time. How did one of those vehicles work?
Well, The battery will be up and everything. You pull the switch up like that, and it's set right. Then if you push it, that turns the motor with the belt, and then it'd start firing, and then you put it back like that to run, and control it with a gas lever right there. This is a deluxe cab, though.
But you had to crank them to start them, didn't you, Bob?
No, push them. Well, both.
Well,
But
this one had a long crank on it.
yeah, they all carried a crank in case the rail was icy, because the back wheels would slide. And after a train run in the wintertime, it'd be oily. So it'd be best to crank them.
These durable vehicles weighed about 700 pounds and ran using a gasoline and oil mixture. Bob sometimes traveled over 100 miles a day on his rounds. How fast could you go in these things?
Well, this guy here, probably 30 mile an hour would be a good speed, unless you're going with the wind, high wind. No, it slowed them down a lot when they put these big cabs on. They used to run without any hardly, just a little windshield like that.
Yeah.
They'd run a lot faster. Yeah, he hung his meter right there, I'll bet.
I suppose.
Must have been a signal maintainer.
The cars were equipped with long handles that extended from the front and back to allow the operator to remove it from the tracks in the event of an oncoming train.
When you meet a train, though, unexpectedly, and you have to set over the rail, the way you can do that if you're excited, but getting it back on took a lot of lifting, but I've done it.
When did they stop using these?
They never did, really. I had mine when the railroad shut down. They're sitting in the depot down here at Marengo.
They have clubs of them now. They run them on them old tracks up in Minnesota around the mine country. They have clubs, they have them all fixed up, run them all over the country.
Most of the problems with signal boxes were exhausted batteries, according to Bob. But a look inside shows how complex they really were. Bob describes a vital communications link, the dispatcher's box.
Talk to you. And the trainmen, they copied orders here. And the main here, I'd stop and ask where a certain train was at. You didn't used to do that, but his agents kept them locked. Kept the depot locked, too, on weekends. And that's your lightning protection. It come in off the lines, that's all it is. And this, see, that cuts it off, too. And you lift the lid. Because the lightning come here, it'll burn them fuses out. But that's all it is, just a circuit comes in. Right there, the wires that come in on. Goes out on that, in there, out. And that's the filter. Keep them shorting the line out. And it goes over here to the phone.
Ward Meyer of Victor is a longtime train enthusiast whose interest goes back to the 1950s. He has chronicled in photographs many of the trains and people who passed through Victor. His photos illustrate trains speeding past the Victor depot. He took the photo of the last passenger train to travel through town in 1970. Occasionally, a train would derail in the Victor area, as shown here.
And kind of got interested in trains, though, kind of watched them on TV, and then I went to the HLV school up here, and I knew the depot agent down here, and I went down and talked to Mr. Glenn Street, and got to visiting with him in there, and I kind of got to watching the trains go by, and that was back in about 1958, 59, somewhere in there, and just kind of more or less been doing it ever since. Got to know a lot of the train crew members, and they got to know me real good, and they let me give them hand signals if there would be something wrong on the train, and they'd answer my signals, and they all appreciated it, and just kind of more or less turned out to be a hobby, and I enjoy it. That's why they'd let me ride. They got a lot of rock and sand in there from the cement plant, and the lumber yard was getting lumber in down there, and then there was a AC dealer there. He was getting machinery in, so they was always doing a lot of switching down there, and I got to ride with them probably half hour, sometimes 45 minutes.
What do you like best about train travel?
Oh, I really don't know. I think just the idea of those cars all just in a straight line going down the track, and wonder how they stay there.
The restored Victor Depot represents a link to the great railroads of the past. Standing inside the depot, you can almost hear the train whistle in the distance.